Hello and welcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be with you all, brothers and sisters, and especially with you, Sister Fatima, my guest today on Soul of Islam Radio. I want to really welcome you, Sister Fatima. It's been great to hear back from you. I know we first had contact many years ago, and you've done a lot since then. And I'd like to maybe just actually take a moment to have you introduce yourself and maybe share with myself, with the audience, how we know each other.
Okay. Um, so I am an author and I also do consulting work where I work with healthcare companies around compliance, and then I work with individuals and organizations just on doing retreats and helping individuals pretty much do the work that they need to do in order to build community and to get the right direction in their lives. So I met you about 10 years ago, and and I had my brother had recently passed away, and my brother was the individual in the family who was that Islamic scholar. And I had been pretty lazy about doing my own work and my own research because I would just simply pick up the phone and ask him. And he would cite Quran and he would cite Hadith. And so after his passing, I felt like I needed to do more work, that I needed to be more serious about my studies and about my dean, and to being able to have more of an influence on his children who he left behind. And so I had been doing meditation probably at that time for at least about 10 years, but I felt like there was something missing. And so I started researching Islamic meditation, and I came up with you. And so I called and reached out and started doing a program with you. I think it might have been about 6 or 8 weeks, the Islamic meditation program for about 6 or 8 weeks. And there were a few things in that that was very impactful for me. And I constantly quoted, like throughout that time over the last 10 years. And there was one thing that you said to me that was pretty impactful. I was telling you about some of the things that I wanted to do and the path that I wanted to be on. And I said I didn't know where to begin. And you said to me to just begin. And through that message, I started moving, started doing things, even if it felt uncomfortable. And since that time, I had a vision to live abroad in a Muslim country, and I did. I moved to Morocco for about 2 years. I also had a vision to visit the great masjids of the world. I've since visited a number of those masjids. I also wanted to learn Arabic. I had not known how to read at all, not one word. And I thought, initially I thought it was pretty late in life for me to start learning a language. And I just said, just start. And I got a reminder of that when one of my friends said to me, read this one word. And I read the one word. And she says, okay, you read one word. And that started me on that path of doing that. And I hired a teacher and told him my goal was to be able to read the Quran from beginning to end, and I had a time period that I was going to do it. He said, that's pretty ambitious. And I said, I'm telling you what I want. You're the teacher. You figure out a plan. If I don't do it, you fail, not me. And so he kept me on track, and I was able to reach that goal. Um, and then I started just thinking about the writing side. How do I start to communicate my journey and this message to others? And the first book that I wrote was really a memoir about my journey as a African American professional Muslim, because I used to practice law, so I had to navigate all of that. The law firms in corporate America, being an African American Muslim, and and then it was the transition to writing the book around meditation, because I've meditation, visualization, manifestation, because I really felt like that there was something missing for the Muslim community. When you listen to all of those manifestation um, guided meditations, they're all talking about ask the universe and draw this to you. And there's no mention at all about God. So I really started to say there's something missing here. And that inspired me to start thinking about writing this book, From Vision to Divine Provision.
Yeah, excellent. And I have your book right here. And inshallah, I'm looking forward to getting into some of the ideas that you share in here, which I think that it's such an important, this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because this field is one that, is generally relegated to the new age market. And there's actually really valuable and important, I would say, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that's available there for us, but that is often overlooked within the Muslim community because it's seen to be beyond the purview of, let's say, classical and traditional approaches to Islamic knowledge. So we'll get into that, inshallah. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Just to recap really quickly, I mean, you had, like most human beings, you had dreams, things you wanted to do in life. And most people fail to act on these things. But you took the steps, beginning with a single step. And, this is one of the things that I try to share with clients, that the path is revealed as we walk up on the path. All we have to do is take a step towards what Allah is guiding us to, and then the next step becomes revealed, becomes apparent. And He supports and He facilitates, especially, I would say, when the intention is seeking knowledge, wisdom, guidance, and ultimately His divine pleasure and His divine presence. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what I discovered. One of the, I said one of the dreams I had was to visit, the great masjids of the world. And when I was in Morocco, I rented a place across from Ihsan II, which is one of the great masjids of the world. And that's where I wrote my first book. And one day I was walking across from my apartment to the masjid. And as I was just walking in the direction of the masjid, the thought came to me, when you walk towards Allah, He runs towards you. And because my dream was just to visit the masjids. And here I am living across the street from one. That the call to prayer is waking me up in the morning. I have the waves. I have this majestic masjid, and I have this beautiful call to prayer. And during Ramadan, being there and just the acoustics in that masjid, it was just, it really did hit me, is that it took me taking that step, not knowing where it was going to lead me, and then really realizing the blessing that I was experiencing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful mosque. Actually, I was just there last year in Casablanca. Beautiful, beautiful masjid, mashallah. And that's one of my passions too, to go and see some of these great masajid throughout the world, these houses of Allah, and they have a unique and powerful presence. And may Allah Almighty continue to facilitate. And what you quoted there, right, is a hadith Qudsi: when a servant of mine takes a step towards me, I will take 10 steps towards them. If a servant of mine comes to me walking, I move towards them at speed or running. And I'm remembering a statement that my grandmother, may Allah Almighty bless and rest her soul, she would always say to me, as just traditional wisdom that they inherited from living, in an Islamic, or being brought up in an Islamic environment and world, and one that is actually based more in classical and traditional spiritual Islam. She would always say, when you make haraka, which means action, Allah will then place barakah, right? So haraka equals barakah, blessings and support. And if we can maybe even leave that as one little nugget for people who are listening, right? All we have to do is take the first step, typically, towards anything, towards a trip, towards writing a book, anything. Just begin taking one step and then the next step. And inshallah ta'ala, it will continue to manifest and unfold. Now, you mentioned meditation early on. In our relationship, you came across the Islamic meditation program. From your perspective, Sister Fatima, what would you say is the importance of meditation for a Muslim? And why is that even valuable for people within the Islamic faith?
Well, I do also talk about that in my book. I have a framework that has several stages to it. And one of the stages is that stage of visualization. And it's important because a lot of times we have these dreams, but we don't really even think about like why we want this. What's the importance of it? And so that time of contemplation is really key. So one from the standpoint of looking at your dreams and why you want the dreams, it's important to slow down and be quiet. Also, I believe that Allah will speak to you, but that doesn't happen when you have a lot of noise around, when you can't quiet yourself. And so I've been doing meditation now, I guess well over 20 years, where I don't really leave the house without doing it, whether it's 5 minutes or whether it's 1 hour. But it's a time for me to be quiet and to be in touch with myself. My philosophy is to be able to center myself first before I go out into the world. Because in the world, there's so much distractions and so many things that will lead you astray. And if you don't have a clear vision of who you are and the direction that you're going to take, not just in life, but the direction that day, someone else will direct you. And so I think meditation is very important, in a lot of respects, just from direction in terms of your dreams, being able to connect with Allah and have your clear vision on a daily basis so that no one else is directing you on the wrong path.
Yeah, excellent. I would also maybe just add into that, one of for me personally, for example, one of the great values of meditation is similar to what you were mentioning here, right? To connect with yourself. And I would maybe expand that and say to increasingly become aware of yourself, to know yourself, because ultimately that is the path to knowing Allah, is becoming aware of the self, which means also the ego, the veil between us and Allah Almighty, and learning how that veils us, blocks us, and impedes us from our journeying towards Allah's presence, from our suluk. I say this because I am constantly seeing and confronted with the degree to which within our community people are only given the forms of the religion. They're only given, in terms of Islamic piety, just practices. And so, people, right, in their attempts to be pious will cling to the practices, will attend lectures. But if this type of in, introspective, reflective practice is lacking, there's a type of awareness and a type of development that I think never begins to awaken or blossom. And it's vital because we never really learn to get past the self, past the ego, which also I would say, right, in relation to what you've been discussing, I would say the unfolding of Allah's will for us and receiving his divine abundance and providence, it's the ego that blocks that from us. It's the ego that actually sabotages these things for us. And people don't realize it. So I'm curious if you could maybe add, from your perspective, how the ego sabotages the divine abundance and providence that Allah Almighty has available for his creation. For example, we can say love or wealth or health, but what we don't realize oftentimes is how the ego is the barrier to these things. And if we can just get that out of the way, we will receive more and more. This is, for example, I believe why Rumi said, your task is not to seek for love, but rather to seek and find the barriers you have built within yourself against it.
I agree 100%. I think that, the ego definitely can block the blessings. But also, I think even when we get the blessings, sometimes the ego can have us do the wrong thing with those blessings because we lose sight of why we may have wanted those blessings to begin with. And so it's okay to want wealth, but it's more important to understand that the wealth is not about you, that you're being entrusted with that wealth. And you didn't generate it. It was a blessing from Allah, and it's not just for you. So I think sometimes the ego can make you feel as if your achievements are solely your achievements and that Allah was not in the formula. And then you lose sight of what your responsibility is to your family, your responsibility to the community, the responsibility to the whole ummah.
Mm. Yeah, mashallah. Yeah, as the Prophet ﷺ said, your actions are based upon the intentions. So always keeping that intention at the forefront, is a one way to prevent ego from taking us off course when we do receive divine blessings and openings. So tell us a little bit more about your book, which is very beautifully titled here, From Vision to Divine Provision, the Islamic Art of Sacred Manifestation. And for those of us, this is a copy of the book, and inshallah we'll link to it as well. You can let us know afterwards where people can get a copy.
So this book actually came about in a really interesting way because I had just come back from Morocco and decided that I wanted to buy a house. And I had had a vision board that I felt like I had done most of what I wanted to do on the vision board. So I created a new one. And on this vision board was my home. But when I thought about the home, I wasn't thinking so much about what the house looked like. I was thinking about how I wanted to feel in the house. What did I want to feel when I wake up? What did I want to experience in the house? And I wanted a house where I could build community. So I wanted it for family gatherings. I wanted the home where I could have Muslim sisters come and gather. And so I went to look for a house. The third house went to look at pretty much was the house on my vision board. So, and the house had only been on the market for 3 days. It was very competitive. My realtor is saying, you're going to have to be aggressive if you want this house. And so I immediately start doing my duas about not about getting the house, but what I wanted to do with the house. And one of those things that I wanted to do with the house was have these gatherings. So so the house went through. I closed without any problems. And so I said, okay, now I need to have these gatherings. I'm in a community. I don't hardly know anyone. I put out the word and the sisters came. The first gathering, I had 10 sisters. The second gathering, I had 17 sisters, most of whom I'm meeting for the first time when they ring in my doorbell. So I started talking about my vision board, and they wanted to know how did these things materialize? What kind of prayers did you do? And I started getting asked a lot of questions. So I had to take some time and think about my framework. Like, what are these steps that I'm going through? With this visualization. And so I said, that's the first step, visualizing, having this intention. What do you want to do? What do you want to do with it? And then the next step was looking at the dua. Now you convert that into a dua. Then you got to believe. You have to have enough belief in Allah, but then you have to act. You can't just sit back and pray. There have to be action along with it. And then you have to have that trust, and that trust in Allah. And then there needs to be patience. And when you get it, you have to have the gratitude. And so I started thinking about these steps, and I really did it to address it at the next gathering with the sisters. And it just started to come together and materialize into this book. And so I really do think that this book was the result. It wasn't something that I planned. I was actually working on another book. I was halfway through another book and I stopped and started writing this book because I felt as if this is what I was guided to do, that it wasn't just the process of getting the house, but it was the house, what I wanted to do with the house, and the messages that those sisters gave to me by showing up and asking the questions and saying that they were interested in this and wanting to know. They weren't asking superficial questions. They were asking questions about what kind of duas are you doing? What are you saying in your meditation? How do we do this? And there was so I was feeling this real desire to know from an Islamic perspective. And another sister said to me after she got the book, she says, I'm giving this book to both of my children that's heading to college. She said, because one of them is always talking about this manifestation from a new age perspective. And I want them to be able to get this from an Islamic perspective. And that's really how, really how the book came about, that I feel like it didn't come from me.
Mm. MashaAllah. And that's the best we can hope for, I think, is when we can get out of the way and allow knowledge and wisdom and guidance and light from Allah to flow through us. I believe that's the meaning of really being a deputy or a vice chairman of Allah, to be out of the way so that His will can manifest. So you mentioned here, Sister Fatima, a couple of things, a number of things. One of them, right, was that, okay, you wanted this house, but it wasn't a house for the sake of the house. It was a house for the sake of a greater purpose. Community, for example, gathering, knowledge, wisdom, companionship. So I just want to point that out because, it's easy for us if we listen to the conversation from a new age perspective. It's always about things. It's about the material things, which for us as Muslims, we know have very little value in and of themselves. But as you said, everything is a trust. So what do we do with it? If we have a home, if we have wealth, if we have means, what's the purpose behind it? And that really is what then makes it more possible for us to receive divine support towards those ends. You mentioned feelings, that you focused on the feelings that you would have in such a space. And again, I want to point this out because what I think many people don't understand is the tremendous impact of our feelings or our state on what the quality of what we attract to ourselves in our lives on a daily basis. Whether it comes down to, if we want to use this term, manifesting something we desire, but just in general, how much feelings, our internal feelings, and the need now to take responsibility for those and manage them. Because, right, we could be doing our prayers, might be wearing hijab, might be having a beard, might be going to the mosque, but our feelings can be out of control on a daily basis. We could be completely emotionally dysregulated. And maybe you can speak to, what is the effect and the impact of that on our lives and on the quality of our lives, and even on the preservation of the blessings that Allah gives us. So if you can just maybe speak to the importance of feelings in our state.
Yeah, I think I'll answer that with a story that I've had. I've had a lot of deaths in my family in a very short period of time. And I had a friend of mine who was a therapist, and he said to me, how do you stay balanced? He says, I'm working with people who are really struggling with one death, because he had known me for a short period of time. And in that time, I had lost, I think the first loss was another one of my brothers. And then it was a sister, and then it was one of my best friends. So it was he witnessed this kind of back to back, and he wanted to know, like, how did I stay so balanced? And I didn't answer him right away. And then I was in Morocco sitting on the beach, by myself. It was chilly. I had a blanket on, the sun was going down, and someone was riding a horse in the sunset. And I took a picture and I sent it to him. And I said, this is how, this is how I remain balanced. Because it's being in environments like this, seeing the ocean, seeing the sunset reminds me of Allah. And being in environments that can get you closer to Allah impacts. impacts your emotions. So even in the difficult times, those emotions don't break you and take you, take you off the course. And so when I talked about being in a place, when I asked the questions about how do I want to feel, that is an environment that is peaceful, an environment where I can observe my religion in the way that I want to observe my religion. I can have a place where I can have that companionship where people will come, people will want to come. And all of that impacts, all of that impacts the way that you feel, and having that positive feeling, it gets you up in the morning. It does attract other people to you who can bring positive things into your life. So yeah, so when I talked about the feeling, I'm looking at the feeling, and what that feeling brings and what it inspires, and how it keeps you, how it keeps you balanced.
Mhm. That's wonderful. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this in terms of the relationship between feelings and experiences, or what we end up experiencing and attracting to ourselves. So we can go back, for example, to the verse in the Quran in which Allah Almighty Subhanahu wa Taala says, "Unless you first change what is within yourself, I will not change your circumstances." So one of the things that I try to share with my community and with my clients is that our emotions, we tend to not think of this in this way, but I try to emphasize that our emotions are actually a choice. And they may be typically unconscious choices. Right? We may be angry, we may be sad, we may be elated, we may be at peace due to just sort of what's happening in and around us. And so we're not aware that we're consciously making these choices, but we do actually have agency. We do have choice. And a lot of our emotions are based on really our unconscious thoughts and our unconscious beliefs. These things then shape the way that we react to our thoughts and beliefs in terms of our emotions. And so ultimately, we actually have to learn how to choose peace internally. We have to learn how to choose happiness. And there's always blessings and abundance and divine providence and mercy manifesting and descending upon us. No matter what hardships and difficulties we may be going through in the world, at any moment there's so much divine abundance. And so what are we focusing on becomes the question. The one thing that's the problem, or the 100 things that are good and blessed and positive and right? And so a lot of people, I want to point this out because a lot of people, um, we tend to unconsciously just be driven by the ego and its perspective, its interpretation, its judgments, its labeling of good and bad. And that can often lead us into negative states. And then those, of course, then end up manifesting into negative outcomes, negative results. So if you could talk a little bit about the importance of managing our state and our feelings so that we can become more in alignment with the divine will of Almighty's blessings. As he says, if you are grateful, I will increase you. I will give you more. But we so easily fall out of that state of gratitude because of our focus on negativity.
Yeah. And and this comes back to the question that you ask about, the benefit of meditation, because meditation will also help you regulate those feelings. Being able to have that, being able to have that quiet time to looking within yourself, to looking at, as you said, that gratitude, and understanding that, we have so many more blessings. One of the things that, my mother constantly said, and my mother was just so resilient. She was Christian, and she used to say that the Lord is not going to give you any more than you can bear. And I watched my mother bury 5 of her children, and she always had a very positive attitude, and she lived to be 101 and was in good health for most of that time. So she was really a real role model for me, looking at her and looking at her positive attitude through things and keeping that connection to God. And that impacted how she lived her life. It impacted her health. um it just impacted her outlook, and that was a real lesson for me to watch my mother. And as she lost another child when she was older. This time she's 90, this time she's 95. You're thinking, oh, this is going to really break her, because now she's 95 and she has to deal with this. And she weathered it, but she would always say, um the Lord is not going to give you any more than you can bear. And so that attitude and your feelings and your emotions and how you view things will have an impact on how you face the next day and the next task. So yeah, but I think meditation has for me, has played a big role in that. Meditation in prayer. But one thing I would say, because I do hear sometimes I hear Muslims feel as if that, you can just pray through things. And and my position is sometimes you can be in a state of, when you're in that state of depression, state of despair, that actually blocks your relationship with Allah. And so you have to really deal with those emotions sometime in order to even get to a state where you can have that conversation with Allah. And that's why it's important to really look at those, really address your emotions, because that in and of itself becomes the block sometimes.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I agree 100%. Because our emotions really are an indication of really what we think and what we believe. And if we truly believe in Allah as the merciful and compassionate and loving and supporting creator, we would not succumb to despondency and anger and despair and hopelessness and all of these sort of negative emotions. We wouldn't easily incline towards negativity. We would be much more positive in our outlook, as was the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Always. In the most difficult of times, he always had a positive outlook. He never succumbed to depression and despondency. MashaAllah. So I want to touch on one other thing that I could share from just even personal experience, and maybe you can relate and talk on it as well. In terms of meditation, that, one of the things that I've experienced is when we really learn to let go and just surrender in meditative practice, really just truly drop all resistance, what begins to happen is that the natural self begins to re-emerge, the fitra that we were created in. And that results in a state of, I would say, just peace and joy, even at times ecstasy and bliss, for no reason at all. Like there's nothing external that has anything to do with that experience, with that feeling that arises as part of our natural state of existence. And meditation makes that possible. Would you agree with that? Would you? Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've worked some pretty stressful jobs that where, most people in those circumstances would be underneath a tremendous amount of stress, practicing law. And I worked in pretty large law firms. And then I've, did healthcare compliance work where I was helping organizations out who were undergoing a lot of challenges, sometimes, regulatory issues. So very stressful environment. And one of the COOs at the organization, she said to me, She said, "You are just the definition of Zen." She said, "I just don't even want to be around you if you blow." Because they were always used to seeing me calm, where everyone else was, in the state of panic. I can't believe this happened. We got to do this. And I would, listen to all of that, let everybody calm down. And I said, okay, now what's our next step? But I would never get pulled into the drama. I was always in this place of, let's think about the solution. This thing, and I will say to my clients sometimes, this is where we are, folks. There's no sense of, you know, um, staying in the problem. And I think that that's a result of the years and years of meditation, that it's very, very difficult to get me worked up about anything, because I'm usually in that calm state. And again, I don't usually leave the house without doing doing that meditation. So from my personal experience, I think that that has definitely had an impact on me in terms of me being able to navigate a lot of stressful and tense environments.
Mm. Beautiful. Absolutely. I mean, meditation is really about connecting with one's root, one's center, deep within. And that's, of course, the rope that Allah Almighty is always extending to us from His divine presence. He says, I'm closer to you than your jugular vein. And when we just sit and breathe, one begins to experience that. I remember one of my first sort of awakening experiences, I guess, if we want to use that term. I had gone to a mosque in the middle of the day, just taking a break from work. I was out on the hills, and at the time, the company I was working at, they were located beautiful location in the San Jose Hills, and so there was a mosque not too far, and I went, but the mosque was closed. Nobody was there at the time. I'd come at a point in between the prayers, so I just prayed outside under a gazebo, just overlooking the hills, and it was so peaceful and so calm and so serene. And I just sat for a moment and just let go, like just became present. And it was as if when I looked around me, it was this feeling of Allah's presence permeating everything. And the thought that arose to me was, subhanallah, you've been here like all along, like you're always here. Right? But it was this meditative moment that provided an opening for that type of experience. And I say this because I really want to encourage Muslims within the community to take this seriously, right? To take it seriously so that we can really learn to go inward and tap into what's available. This is, of course, where the Prophet ﷺ began the message and the mission of Islam, in a cave, meditating, just being present in a state of openness and receptiveness to Allah Almighty's divine will. And, as a community, we've sort of lost and forgotten this. And it's a key, it's the key to returning to the origin of Islam. So, thank you for sharing your perspective on that, Sister Fatima. I want to maybe transition into a little more detail about your book. And so, if you could maybe share with us a simplified framework that you share in the book for people to be able to take advantage of, to more and more come into alignment and into a harmony with a life that is blessed and peaceful and abundant and prosperous on every level. What's the framework that you share and the strategies that you share in this book?
The book is actually broken up into three parts. The first part of it is really kind of foundational, and I encourage Muslims and non-Muslims both to read it, because sometimes Muslims might think I know this already, but it really kind of gives that foundation and talks about the difference between kind of the new age concepts of manifestation and the Islamic framework, and reminding Muslims, this has been a part of our practices all along, that this is nothing new. I'm not introducing anything new. I'm just really putting it into a framework to help people get through the various phases. So the second part of the book is that framework that I talked about, and it takes you through every step of the framework, from the visualization to the duas and the belief, the actions, trust, surrender, and then the process of receiving. And I guide individuals through that process with each step. There's also some journey prompts that I call them journey prompts, that prompts people to do certain exercises. That's something that can be done through journaling. Some of it is exercises in terms of taking that 5 minutes for that your meditation before you start that day, that check in the middle of the day, and that meditation period at the end of the night. And so I do know that for some people they need to start slow, since they even just start with 5 minutes. But there's lots of examples throughout the book, examples of duas that you can make. And the last part, the last third of the book, is really for those challenges that we reach in life. Like, it's easy to go through this process when everything is smooth. It's easy to commit to something without being tested. So the third part of the book is really dealing with those seasons of life. How do you maintain this through the seasons of life? How do you maintain it when you have, challenges, when you have divorces, when there's deaths in the family? It also deals with when you have to make those decisions. Like the first book that I wrote, Crescent Over Crossroads, I talk about when I reach these crossroads in life and have to make these decisions. And the reason why I said crescent over crossroads is because I want to be able to make those decisions being guided by the religion. And sometimes that's difficult, when you feel like when you follow your religion, you might lose your job, or there's some kind of sacrifice. So the book, that third part of the book, deals with those real life issues that we face. We're committed and then we get tested. And it's like, how do you pass the test when you're going through these challenges in your life? And I speak about it through a lot of lived experiences. It's the experiences, that I've had when I've been offered jobs that I didn't think aligned with, who I was, or how I wanted to practice my faith. I remember when I quit one of my jobs, my everybody was saying to me, "How are you quitting a good paying job in a bad economy?" And my brother said to me, "You make a prayer for guidance and you follow it. Do not listen to people that don't come from your value system." And so I did. And I quit. And that was about 15 plus years ago. And I've been self-employed ever since. But these are the tests. It's will you make those decisions when when you have to say, I'm gonna lose money, or I'm gonna lose my job. So that's the third part of the book. I've tried to anticipate those challenges that people are gonna face in life as they start to put these principles into practice.
MashaAllah. Faith over fear comes to mind. And so much of life, right, is about making our faith real. The challenges, the hardships, the trials, difficulties, the struggles, these are all serving a divine purpose, and ultimately to make faith real. How would you define and how would you describe this idea that is, again, very popular in the New Age world? I'm not sure how popular it is still, but it was quite popular for a while. The law of attraction. How would you describe that?
Well, I think you can attract things to you, but the challenge with the new age approach is that it becomes very self-centered. That the concept is that it's all about you. That if you believe it enough, you say it enough, you chant it enough, you do enough affirmations, that all of these things, all of these positive things will happen. If you believe you're going to be a millionaire, you're going to be a millionaire. And it doesn't factor in Allah. And that is the challenge. So it's and that's my struggle with it. And when I was starting to write this book, someone said to me, well, why are you going to put, why are you going to put all of the quotes from the Quran and quotes from the Hadith? Because there's quotes from the Quran and the Hadith all throughout my book. They said, because if you didn't do that, it would appeal to a lot more people. And I said, it still can appeal to a lot of people. But oftentimes, we as Muslims, we have to take things and we have to retrofit it for us. I said, this is a book that a Muslim can pick up and know it's for them. It's for others who are from God-centered beliefs as well, because they'll start to read it and they'll see similarities in terms of the ayats that the Bible says something like that as well. So that is, I think that's my challenge with it. Not that there's no credibility in it. It's just that it's missing a critical element, and that belief can make you think it's all about you and forget that it really is about Allah, and that none of it will come to you if it's not the will of Allah for you to have it.
I've seen how this field of inquiry and knowledge, as well as any other, by having a background in Islam, it helps you understand it so much better and so much clearer. That's been my experience. So it's not just some sort of, I don't know, simplified, superficial, uh, fanciful sort of belief system, but Islam really helps you understand these things. So, for example, I remember when I first came across The Secret and the Law of Attraction, and I remember at the end of it, watching the film version, it really came down to this one thing: feeling good, meaning feeling in a state of peace, in a state of contentment, in a state of surrender. And for me, it's like, subhanAllah, this is Allah's will. Like, if we can enter into that state, which is the state of Islam, well, that's what He wants from us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, of course, we can say that the universe has been built and established in such a way that it will, let's say, use the term reward that state. And if you're, as Allah says, if you are grateful, if you're in a state of gratitude and shukr and thankfulness, He's going to give you more. You're going to attract more. You're going to be given more by Him. So it's very valuable work what you're doing in terms of, I would say, bridging the gap between these ideas and real Islam, traditional classical Islam, which is of benefit for everybody, Muslims and non-Muslims.
It it is because, yes, and as I said, the concept has validity. It's just the way it's being communicated, because the Quran says, "Ask, and I will give to you." It says, "Be grateful, and you'll get more." So the concept is there, Islamically. As I said, my only challenge with it is that it takes Allah out of the equation. And one of the books, what is it? The one after The Secret. I'm forgetting the name of it. I actually mentioned it in my book, but it actually quotes the Quran as well. So I think you know they also understand the concept, but what happens is that people try to make it appeal to the masses, and so they take language out that has reference to Allah. And so it's, oh, ask the universe, and because that has more universal appeal as opposed to saying ask Allah. And so you'll find that kind of watering down in order for that mask appeal. And I think that so those that are talking about manifestation and the secret, I think they actually probably have an understanding, but just know that it needs to be packaged differently if they want to market it to the masses.
Right. And it's so much more powerful when it is properly, I think, approached and understood, when spirituality is properly approached and understood as being God centered, God focused. And then I would say it also serves a purpose beyond just this physical, temporal, material world. It also then, our practice then benefits us, not just in dunya, but also in akhir, inshallah.
One of my uh, uh, a friend of mine asked me, I was doing another podcast, and before the podcast started, he said, Are, you seem very comfortable using the word Allah, even when you're talking to mixed audiences. He said, how do you get comfortable? How did you get so comfortable with it? And I was saying, well, I do communicate to people oftentimes because I have Christians in my family that we're talking the same God. You may be calling him a different name, but there's only one supreme being. And I think that it's important for me to acknowledge who that supreme being is. And one of my family members who's Christian, I noticed that when she's talking to me now, she will say Allah. So my conversation with him, that it's important for us not to really for us to really dilute our religion in order to make someone else feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Alhamdulillah. Well, Sister Fatima, it's been an absolute pleasure to see you in person, to have this conversation. And I want to thank you for joining us, but even more importantly, for your work. I think it's extremely valuable, extremely necessary and needed. And I would highly encourage anybody to connect with you and to get the book. This one in particular, from vision to divine provision. So if you can, maybe if you want to just end and share anything that comes to your heart for the audience, as well as how people can reach out and connect with you and with your work, that would be great.
So the book is on Amazon. It's also in Barnes and Nobles as well. And the author title is Fatimah Linda Howard, and you can find me with my handle on most of the social media platforms is at with Linda Howard. So that's my YouTube handle, Facebook, Instagram. Also, I have a website with Linda Howard as well. My email address, engage at with Linda Howard. So definitely reach out to me. I'm looking for feedback from the book as people start to get into it, because I think this is going to be a process and a journey, and I will learn from other people, and probably there will be some revisions based on feedback that I get. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from other people as well about the book. So engage at with Linda Howard is my email to reach out to me. And I guess I would say one of the things that I will say would like to communicate to the audience, and particularly those who are Muslim, that I'm not introducing anything new. It's just framing it that this is a part of our religion, that there is nothing haram about asking Allah and asking big, as long as there's the right intentions involved, and being grateful for what you receive, and understanding that a part of that gratitude is recognizing where those blessings are coming from. So my word to individuals who tell me, that they're into the new age concept, is that, why would you ask the created instead of asking the creator. So it's not about asking the universe, it's about asking Allah. And when you have the right intentions in your heart, blessings come.
Ameen. Ameen. Alhamdulillah. Thank you again, Sister Fatima. It's been a pleasure. And we'll have a link to your website in the show notes below this as well. And I hope we'll have a chance to speak again at some point in the future. Inshallah.
Bismillah.
Okay. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.